Welcome back to the class, everyone. Today we're going to be looking at Darth Malgus once again. About a month ago, before he came out, we had taken a speculative dive into how good he was going to be, where he was going to be, what he needed, how it was going to look like, and I think we got a lot of things right, but we did get some things wrong, and I want to cover some other stuff as well. So if you want to check that video, you can go ahead and check it out over there, because this video isn't really going to repeat everything that was said. It's really going to aim at hitting this with new information. We've now had Malgus for an entire 3v3 season and partially for a 5v5 season, as well as for TW, so we have a good idea of what he is and what he needs. So first off, we're just going to review a few things from the other video and how we got them wrong or right, and that would be starting off with his Omicrons. One thing we did get right: the leader is essential. If you want to use him in GAC, and you do if you relatively care about the game mode at all, you have to have the leadership. I'm not going to rehash all the reasons why, but it is crucial. It's something that we've been able to test versus various counters on both offense and defense. This makes or breaks the character. Non-negotiable there. One thing that we did get wrong, however, though, is the order of his other two Omicrons. I would still say that they're very much niche. They don't change the vast majority of battles. They can be nice to have, but at the end of the day, the special, I think, is going to be more bang for your buck than the unique. It still does some very useful things in here. The turn meter's nice. The irresistible debuffs is nice. The critical chance up is nice. There's a lot of good things that come out of that. But the real kicker is this unique Omicron doesn't even exist in 3v3. I know it doesn't specifically say that, but if you look at the mechanics of the entire ability, and someone actually pointed this out in our last video, so shout out to you who did that, the doubt will always spread to two random allies or two random enemies here that it says. If you're in a fight with 3v3 and you're hitting one character and the other allies or the other two enemies are random, that's the entire team. So this is useless. The Omicron is useless in 3v3 unless you're fighting against, Jews or Tuscans. So definitely you want to aim for the special first. So that pretty much covers what we had with Omicrons. As far as his relic level goes, we kind of got this right, but also got it wrong. I was telling people that we should probably keep him at relic 7, because at the end of the day, he kind of sucks at taunting. He's not going to be the one who's going to be tanking the majority of the hits. And while that was kind of true in Territory Wars, it's really not true in JC. The amount of speed he gets on a practical level through all the bonuses that we talked about in the first video, along with giving his enemies negative 20 speed through Doubt, he is able to consistently get back to his specials and constantly taunt. Not to mention when you're feared when he's not taunting, it really just kind of ruins the whole thing for your opponent, or if you're fighting him when he's on defense. So he is able to taunt more, and with being able to taunt more, you want him to be taking the hits, and he can really benefit, if you can, giving him a Relic 8 or Relic 9. I'm not in a position where I can do that. I still have other big projects like Profundity that are coming along that, as you can see, I don't exactly have these resources at a maximum, so I can't really give him there. But if you're a person who does have a lot of Relic 8s, maybe you have 20 plus or something like that, you can do this. Not my position, but it's still a wise idea. One other thing to add to that, and why I think it's good now, even with the current Datacron setup, is the health boost he gets from this alone almost makes it worth it. Even without him being the taunting tank that he is, and he's pretty good at it, the health boost on this ability is ridiculous. It is a lot of damage. We really didn't understand what this was going to look like in all practicality, but this move, when you have him juiced up enough, whether it be through mods, through the Omicrons, through the relics, he can just one-shot some really tanky characters. So the higher relics on him really can be justified by that move alone. So that's as far as his Omicrons and his relic levels go. Let's take a look at his mods once again. So this is one area where I really think we hit the nail on the head. All health on the sets, 3 health primaries here on the triangle, the square, or not the square, the cross and the circle, and crit avoidance on the arrow. And I think this is really the only area that I differ with most people, is the crit avoidance on the arrow. And the reason why you want it here, because in both 3v3 and 5v5, the counter that has the biggest shot against Malgus is General Skywalker. It's not even a very good shot, but if you're wanting to try to minimize that as much as possible, I think crit avoidance, not only on Malgus, and this is something we didn't talk about in the last video, but also on the other characters in your team, is going to help mitigate what Gas can do. Right now, Malgus has a really good Datacron where his cooldowns completely refresh, but on the other characters, when Gas is coming in, and if he's still able to crit your characters, even though you have 80% critical avoidance, he's going to be constantly increasing Darth Revan and Bastila Fallen's cooldowns, and you really want to be able to have their cooldowns constantly on things so that you can interfere and take control of the battle. So that is one thing. We didn't talk about this last video about the rest of the team, but this is one thing I would suggest if you're looking to make some tweaks on the rest of your team that you're building for Malgus. I would highly suggest crit avoidance on both Darth Revan as well as Bastila Fallen. I think it's a lot better than just a speed arrow. 28 really isn't realistic for the vast majority of the player base. If you can get a speed arrow, or sorry, a speed set with a 20 speed secondary, I think that would make it worth it for getting the 35 critical avoidance. Not just for the survivability, that is helpful, but also to keep Gas from doing really what he likes to do. So that is pretty much going to cover modding as a whole. I wouldn't, if you want to, it depends on how much you care about territory wars. One of the big questions I got in the last video is how much slower can I make Darth Revan? And I think you can probably go down to about 320, maybe 310 or something like that, at least for GAC. I still don't see a big reason to put offense mods on him, or Bastila Fallen for that matter. She can also be quite a bit lower too. She could probably is fine around the 280 level, just because when Malgus goes first, he's the one who's taking control of the battle. His doubt spreads, his doubt turns to fear, takes control, does fantastic. The one thing that I mentioned earlier about territory wars is Malgus doesn't have massive speed in Territory Wars, nor does your team have crit avoidance. So that becomes a really big negative to try to be sacrificing a bunch of speed to be able to get the crit avoidance. And then your Darth Revan doesn't go first, and the enemy team's able to go before you, even without a Datacron, and they wreck you. It's not good value for Territory Wars, but ultimately, if you're trying to maximize your results for GAC, you can slow them down, give the mods to someone else, throw crit avoidance on them, and call it a day. Talon, I don't really like crit avoidance on her just because she's not Sith Empire, so she doesn't get that bonus even with the Omicron. I do like trying to make her tanky, and one thing that I do need to do that I haven't done yet is, if you're, again, really wanting to maximize this team, defense sets and protection primaries on Malak. I've always been kind of anti-defense sets on Malak because ferocity, when you have 15 stacks of ferocity, it is just thrown in the trash. With only 5 stacks of ferocity, with Darth Malak's bonuses that he has in here, where he gains a bunch of extra defense as his health starts to go down, he gets really, really tanky. And something we're going to see when we look at Datacrons here in a second is Malak is actually going to be your primary taunter, because if you get Malgus with the quote-unquote good Datacron, he's not going to be taunting a whole lot at all. So that pretty much does cover the team's modding, how it needs to change if you're trying to maximize your results. Talon doesn't really matter. She's still mostly there for her unique. If you want to make her tankier, that's probably on the safe side of things. Now, as far as the comps go, we talked about this briefly in our other video as well. I really think we got this right. For 5v5, this is the best comp in my opinion. You can kind of sub in Marauder in a few places, and it does okay, or set as well. Definitely don't do HK. But for the most part, this seems to be the most dominant. The amount of talent that adds to Malgus, I'm not going to rehash everything that was in the last video, but this has been pretty proven to stop the most amount of counters. The same for 3v3. I think we got that right as well. Darth Revan and Bastila Fallen really give you the best value. Malak can go to something else. It's actually even funny. I'll pull up when we go into counters here in a second, I'll pull up all the non-GL counters, and you actually see this is what is holding the best in 3v3. Not Malak, but Darth Revan and Bastila Fallen. And it kind of makes sense. Malak is a really good taunting tank. Malgus kind of already takes that place. And Malak as well, the crit avoidance does not mix well with his kit, because then he never really fears anyone. But speaking of counters, so these are our comps, and these are going on defense, which in my opinion, they really should be right now. What are you going to be using to counter them? So non-GL counters, we're going to pull those up for 3v3 first, because that's what I last mentioned. You can see in here there are a variety of things that are people using to counter, most of which unsuccessfully if you're using a good comp. This comp here right now that is my favorite here in the middle that we just previously looked at, you can see that it has the best results out of all the counters. It's only being beat 20% of the time by both Traya and Gas, and if you're not able to use one of those two, you either have to use a Galactic Legend or some stupid broken Datacron like Jedi Knight Luke's. So still probably the best value you have. If you want to switch over to 5v5, you're going to see that the comp that we've chosen is very hard to beat with a non-Galactic Legend. Even Starkiller struggles against it, especially if he can't go first. And this is why I was mentioning crit avoidance, because you can see the Gas is a 60% success rate, even against the best, in my opinion, Sith or Malgus team. So you want to try to mitigate what he can do the most, and he's actually still being tried the most. So I think, especially for this week, if you're watching this video right now, we're about to start a new GAC session. If you have time to change your modding, I think you are going to see instant results pretty quickly. So that pretty much covers what we're trying to stop. Now, let's go ahead and take a look really quickly at what you can be using to beat Malgus when you're going against him on offense. So a little bit of the reverse here. We have a few options. One of the best options right now is going to be C and Want. This works if they don't have the correct Datacron. We'll get to Datacrons in a second here. But if they have the cooldown increase on their level 9 Malgus, this doesn't work. It can work, but you have to put in 3 other useless Sith here for them to delay to get to Sith Eternal. The issue is, like we've seen, Malgus can be super fast, and he can actually loop your C and end up constantly increasing his cooldowns, and you just never get to zap anyone, and you actually time out, which really sucks. Next up counter that I really like is going to be SLKR Zombie Watt. If you swipe first with SLKR, it is very, very hard for the enemy's Sith team to actually kill him, and it's really not even a timeout risk different from Lord Vader. Lord Vader, you can't decrease his mastery. Malgus, even though he feels like a galactic legend, at the end of the day he isn't, so you can just decrease his mastery into the dirt, and then SLKR can kill him after like 3 swipes. It's really, really fun to use. We've done it once. And then the last option, I'm almost thinking of making an entire video on this just because of how useful it's been for me. We've done this 3 times now. It's not foolproof. We've had 2 people fail it because of fear and things like that. But using a 2-shot between this Qui-Gon Jinn team with Jedi Anakin and then Traya. Qui-Gon Jinn and 5v5, you can pretty easily go in there, blow up most of the sides, particularly Darth Revan and Bastila Shan Fallen. And then Traya, with a bunch of tanks, has actually had really good success at just annihilating the rest of the team. Sometimes it takes 5 minutes, but it is an option that you can use if you're wanting to maximize your results. So that pretty much only leaves right now that we still need to cover our Datacrons. We didn't talk about Datacrons at all in the last video because they actually didn't have set 3, and I was pretty sure we were going to. So his is pretty straightforward. I'm not going to talk too much about stats. I just don't think it's not that relevant for everyone in the game. I've almost never rerolled a stat. I don't end up ever having enough of these after I get everything I want, but if you can, armor's probably good, but focusing on the level 3, the level 6, and the level 9. Level 3, I'm probably not going to make any comments about, actually. Doesn't really matter. Most of them are about the same. The max health, or the max percent damage that they take when they get a debuff, that's probably good, but, you know, this team has a ton of offense. Speaking of which, for the level 6, I think you have 2 really good options. Preferred is probably going to be the stacking offense whenever they get feared, whenever they get doubted, or whenever the enemy gets shocked. That's going to add a ton of offense to your team, and with the crit damage and crit chance you're getting from Malgus, you're going to be able to hit really stinking hard. The other option I think that can work is the one that we have, the one where they have a lot of recovery. The team kind of builds damage over time with how Malgus' stacking health works and his other hit works, so you're going to get there eventually, or at least you should versus most teams. So this one can be pretty useful. One thing that I will warn against that I don't like, that I think a lot of people have gone for, is the one that cuts your defense in half and uses it as offense. The team already has a lot of damage between Darth Revan, Bastila Shan Fallen, Talon, and Malgus. And for you to sacrifice your defense, I think, is what is letting a lot of these gas counters work. I've only watched 1 video on it, so this is super speculative. But when I was watching it, gas just chewed right through the enemy team because they have 50% less defense, and they put on Ferocity, they get rid of all of it, and he just wiped them. It was kind of sad to see at some points. In the level 9, Malgus has 2 level 9s. Both are actually very good. I definitely, and I think the general sentiment is that the level 9 that he has, that decreases his cooldowns every single turn, that is the better one. It is worth mentioning right now that it actually makes Malgus Omicron for a special useless for the next 3 months, because he's always going to be preferring his big hit rather than the attack that makes him taunt. So that is worth noting. But the other level 9, it's not bad. The one that I think it adds like crit chance and crit damage for every stack of we have returned. It might not be the one you need to reroll the most, depending on what you're going for with BAM or C or whatever else you have. It's really not that bad of an option, but if you can, definitely go with the cooldown decrease. It's the best one of the 2. So that pretty much is going to cover it today, guys. Let me know what you think of the video. If you disagree with anything, you think we missed any topic. I'm really trying to be as comprehensive as possible, especially with the amount of data we have now. I think this is a little bit easier to do, but as always, remember to like and subscribe and stay awesome.